Stacey Murphy here with the video on watering your crops. And remember, it's going to take some time for you to get the hang of all this, but over time you're going to become very confident knowing when things need water and exactly how much water they need. And in the future, you may decide you want to automate your water, but it's good to do all of this manually at the start to commit to a daily watering practice so you can understand how much to tell an automated watering system to use. And your goal here is to get just the right amount of water to your plants. So at the start, it's totally normal to overwater as you're trying to keep your plants from dying. I'd rather have you overwater a little than underwater and lose your crops. So over time, you're going to notice that you can dial things back to the exact amount that you need. So there are 7 essentials to understanding how much water that your crops need. The first is that prehydration is key for your soil and for your seed starting mixes. And you want to make sure that your media holds water and doesn't repel water. You don't want water rolling off the top of the surface. You want it sinking in. So you want to go back and review the seed starting video to understand how to make seed starting and potting mixes hydrophilic, which means water loving. And then for your soil, what you want to do first is notice the top of your soil may be dry, but it's not necessarily what's going on deeper down. So the first thing you want to do is understand your soil moisture. So the essential number 2 is how do you do that? How do you determine how much moisture your soil is currently holding, and is it hydrophilic? So what you're going to do is you're going to dig down about 6 inches and you're going to grab a handful of soil. And if you can squeeze that soil into a ball, that means your soil is holding on to moisture. And this is the ideal that we're looking for on any given day, that it squeezes into a ball and then when you tap it, it crumbles. So how do you make this the case? Again, you want to make sure that you prehydrate your bed. If you're just starting out with new soil and it's really dry looking, then you want to make sure you prehydrate your bed before you seed or transplant into it. You want to make sure it's moist, but it's not wet. If you were to grab a handful of your soil and that water is able to squeeze water out of it, then that's too wet. You don't want to work soil when it's that wet because it can damage the structure. So what you want is this prehydrated, moist mix, and then you're ready to plant. Okay, so essential number 3 is to water the soil and not the plants. So when you transplant, what you're going to do is water the soil around the transplant instead of the plant itself, and it's going to sink down into those roots. And this is true of watering in general. As much as you can, you want to water the soil. And sometimes it's just not possible if you have a lot of crops that are very densely planted, like arugula or broadcasted spinach. These are things that you're going to have to spray the top of, and that's totally fine. But for the most part, you want to water the soil when you can. Now, essential number 4 is that you want to start by watering once a day. You want to get into the practice of watering so that you don't forget. You don't want to be in the case of, well, I watered yesterday, I think, or did I not? And then something dies because you forget to water. So get in the habit of watering every day. And vegetable crops thrive with 1 to 2 inches of rain each week, which means about 1/8 of an inch each day. So that's about 3 centimeters. And when plants are older, you can water them every other day, but when they're babies, they really want their water on the surface, and so you want to keep that moist, which leads me to essential number 5. So small plants, little tiny seeds and little tiny babies, they want shallow watering more often, and large crops want deeper watering less often. Why is this? Basically, it's the size of the roots. Think about it. When you have a teeny tiny seed, everything is at the surface, and so you want to keep that moist. But then if you have a big tomato crop later in the season, you can water it every other day, every third day, as long as you water it very deeply. So for those crops that are being seeded, you may have to water them more than once a day just to keep that surface moist. And so what you want to do for those particular seeds, because they have little tiny, tiny roots, you want to water when the surface is 30% dry, and then you water the whole surface. You don't water just where it's dry, you water the whole surface. And those seeds are getting water just from the surface, so it's important to keep that surface moist. And so it's good to plant seeds on cloudy days or rainy days, or just before rainy days, so that you can take advantage of all that natural water falling from the sky. Okay, so essential number 6 is that you want to water during the cool part of the day. So if you water towards the hot part of the day, the water will just evaporate off the surface. So you want to water in the early morning when it's cold outside and the sun is not yet at its peak. And this allows the moisture to sink into those root structures. And late afternoon works well too as the sun is starting to set. So what I notice about my garden during this 40-day challenge is that I basically watered about a minute into my garden beds, and I sprayed evenly back and forth across all the beds, making sure I got my edges as much as I got the middle. And I spent about a minute watering both of my beds together, and I would do that once a day in the morning. Okay, essential number 7 is to be like a gentle rain. You don't want to be like a storm and splash your soil all over the place. So when you're watering, you basically want to stand away from the garden bed and let the water fall gently down on your crops from your hose or your wand. And you don't want to spray the soil close up with a fast jet of water. What that's going to do is it's going to compact the soil, it's going to move the soil around, it's going to potentially damage your plants if the plants are there. So I like to buy a wand that has multiple settings so I can choose the one that is gentle, especially for those baby plants. And notice there are some settings that have hard streams of water coming out the center of your wand. And so you want to make sure that before you aim this at your garden bed, you pick the right settings so that you don't hurt your soil or your plants. And as you gain experience, like I said, you're going to find exactly how much water is the right amount of water, and then you can learn to automate your watering in the future as well. But for now, take these 7 essentials and learn to water daily. Notice how much your plants are responding to the water, and you're going to be surprised how much you're going to learn in 40 days.